Beneath the twinkling lights of San Francisco, Julian Carter stood before the glass window of his office, gazing down at the shimmering bay, his heart weighed down by a haunting secret. As a towering icon of technology, he was on the verge of announcing a billion-dollar deal. Yet a name from his past, Clara Evans, stirred a restless unease within him. Miles away, in the quiet suburbs of Seattle, Amelia Brooks clung tightly to her children, battling crushing debt and the searing pain of betrayal from a husband she believed was gone forever. Two souls, two journeys, interwoven with ambition, sacrifice, and the quest for redemption. Can Julian confront the mistakes of years gone by? What will Amelia do when a shocking truth comes to light? In a tempest of emotions, where past and present collide, will they find the light or sink deeper into the shadows? A story of truth, resilience, and new beginnings awaits your discovery. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. Beneath the twinkling lights of San Francisco, Julian Carter stood motionless in his glass-walled office on the 50th floor, his deep brown eyes tracing the radiant Golden Gate Bridge aglow in the sunset. At 40, he was an icon of Silicon Valley, a pioneer who crafted an app connecting billions of souls across the globe. His charcoal gray suit, meticulously tailored, clung to his frame, accentuating the confident stature of a man who had conquered every challenge. Yet, as he adjusted his tie with faintly trembling fingers, a silent wave of unease surged within his chest. Tonight, at the Fairmont Hotel, he would announce a billion-dollar deal, a milestone marking the pinnacle of his career. Glory awaited. Fame beckoned. So why did his heart feel so heavy, as if anchored by an invisible thread from the past? Julian stepped toward his desk, where the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminated a pristine white envelope, standing out amidst the clutter of work documents. Inside was an invitation addressed to Clara Evans, a name he had tried to bury in his memories, yet one that never truly left him. Clara, his college sweetheart, the light in his days of dreaming under Stanford's hallowed halls. Sending this invitation wasn't merely a courteous gesture. No, it was a prideful act, a way to flaunt to her that he had achieved everything: wealth, fame, power. But deep in his soul, Julian knew it was also a desperate whisper, a question he dared not face. Would she see the real him, or merely the glittering facade he had so carefully constructed? He paused, his fingers lightly grazing the envelope's smooth surface, feeling its texture as if touching a faded fragment of memory. Clara. She had once known him better than anyone, seeing through his burning dreams and the fears he kept hidden. But he had chosen to leave her, abandoning her under the moonlight in Palo Alto, where her pleas dissolved into the air. He had chosen his career, believing love was the price to pay for glory. Now, standing in his opulent office, Julian felt a strange void. Money couldn't fill it. Accolades couldn't soothe it. It was the emptiness of a man who had sacrificed too much, unsure if he had truly won. The sunset bathed San Francisco Bay in crimson, its final rays slipping through the glass, casting a warm yet wistful hue across Julian's face. He closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath, trying to banish Clara's image, her gentle smile, her luminous eyes, and the pain he had glimpsed when he walked away. Tonight, at the Fairmont, he would stand before hundreds, proclaiming his success to the world. But deep inside, he wondered, would Clara come? What would she see in him? A hero or a coward who fled from love? The question pierced like a blade, sharp and unrelenting, cutting through the confident veneer he had so painstakingly built. Julian turned, stepping out of the office, his polished leather shoes echoing rhythmically on the marble floor. But each step felt like a pull back to the past, to the moments when Clara held his hand, when they dreamed of a future not just of fame, but of each other. He had chosen a different path, one that led him to the summit. So why, in this moment, did he feel as if he stood on the edge of a precipice? Part of him yearned to prove to Clara that he was right, that their sacrifice was worth it. But another part, small and fragile, was afraid. Afraid she would see through him, not Julian Carter, the tech titan, but Julian, the man who abandoned her to chase a glittering mirage. As the elevator doors slid open, Julian stepped inside, the cold white light enveloping him. He caught his reflection in the mirror, a man of success, yet his eyes bore a nameless sorrow. Tonight, everything would change. The billion-dollar deal would be announced. His reputation would soar higher. But in his mind, there was only Clara, and what he had lost. Would she come? Would she bring answers to the questions that had haunted him for years? Or would she merely be another shadow, reminding him of the true cost of his triumph? He pressed the button for the ground floor, the elevator humming softly, pulling him from his thoughts. But the unease clung to him, an uninvited companion. Julian Carter, the man who had it all, stood on the cusp of a fateful night, where past and present would collide. And he wasn't sure he was ready. As the last glow of sunset faded over the bay, Julian stepped out of the building, merging into San Francisco's bustling crowds. But in his heart, there was only one name, one memory, and a fear that all this glory was but a facade, concealing a heart still searching for what was lost. Beneath the silvery moonlight of Palo Alto, memories of Julian Carter's years at Stanford University surged in his mind like an old film, faded yet painfully sharp. In those days, he and Clara Evans were a blazing flame in the tech department. Two young souls immersed in lines of code and lofty dreams. They spent hours in the lab, under the flickering fluorescent lights, their hands stained with ink and cold coffee cups beside them. Julian, with eyes aglow with ambition, always spoke of applications that could transform the world. Clara, with her gentle smile and warm heart, reminded him that technology wasn't just about code, it was about touching human lives. They complemented each other, like two perfect puzzle pieces. And in quiet moments, when the lab's lights dimmed, they shared hurried kisses, as if the entire world existed only for them. But the fire within Julian wasn't just passion. It was a tempest, a fierce craving to prove himself, to etch his name across the sky of Silicon Valley. He dreamed of opulent boardrooms, million-dollar handshakes, and a day when the world would know his name. Clara saw that fire, but she also saw its cost. She tried to anchor him to the present, to the evenings they sat by Stanford's lake, sharing small stories and laughter. "We don't have to rush," she once said, her voice soft as a breeze, her hand tightly clasped in his. But Julian didn't listen, or rather he chose not to. Ambition had become his lifeblood, and in his mind, love, no matter how deep, was merely an obstacle on the path to conquest. Each night in the lab, as Clara meticulously reviewed every line of code, Julian pushed the pace, his eyes blazing like a traveler glimpsing treasure. He wanted more, faster, bigger. Clara, with boundless patience, tried to balance him, but she sensed the growing distance between them. The kisses grew scarce, the stories became rushed words, and Julian, though he still loved Clara, began to see her as part of the past. A past he had to leave behind to become the man he believed he was born to be. Love, he told himself, could wait. Opportunity could not. Then the opportunity arrived, sharp and irresistible. A startup in Silicon Valley extended an invitation, promising to place Julian at the heart of the tech world, where dreams were valued in millions. He stood at a crossroads, his heart pounding, but not with hesitation. He knew what he wanted. He craved the spotlight, the world's admiration for his talent, but the price was Clara, the girl who believed in him, loved him, dreamed with him. On the night of their parting, Under Palo Alto's cold moonlight, Clara clutched his hand, her fingers gripping as if to hold him back. "We can do this together, Julian," she said, her voice trembling, tears glistening in her green eyes. "We don't have to be apart." Her words cut like a knife, piercing Julian's heart, but he had made his choice. He gently but firmly pulled his hand away and turned to leave. "I have to do this," he said, his voice low but unable to mask his resolve. "I have to." As Julian walked away, the rustle of leaves beneath his feet mingled with Clara's stifled sobs. He didn't look back, didn't dare to, knowing that if he met her eyes, he might not have the strength to go on. That night, the moonlight seemed brighter, yet colder, as if witnessing a wound that could never heal. Clara stood still, her silhouette small under the trees, her shoulders trembling in silence. Julian got into his car, his heart heavy, but he convinced himself this was the price he had to pay. He would succeed. He would prove he was right. But as the car pulled away from Palo Alto, Clara's image, her pained eyes, her smile extinguished, clung to him, a shadow that never faded. In the years that followed, memories of Clara became a hidden corner of Julian's soul. He threw himself into work, coding day and night, building his tech empire. But in rare moments, when the office lights went out and silence enveloped him, Clara returned. Her smile, her voice, and the pain he had caused. He reassured himself that leaving her was necessary, that he couldn't have both love and a career. But each time he thought of her, a sharp question arose. Had he truly won, or was he merely a fugitive from the most precious thing in his life? That question, like an old wound, never fully healed. Now standing at the peak of his career, Julian prepared to face his past. The invitation sent to Clara was more than a card. It was a door, leading him back to their Stanford days, when he was a dreamer, when Clara was his entire world. He wanted her to see how far he had come, but deep down, he was afraid. Afraid she wouldn't come. Afraid she had moved on, leaving him with regrets he couldn't mend. With Palo Alto's moonlight long gone, Julian knew the night at the Fairmont would be more than a tech event. It was a reckoning, with Clara, with his past, and with the man he had become. Beneath the resplendent chandeliers of the Fairmont Hotel, San Francisco glowed like a palace from a fairy tale. But in Julian Carter's mind, everything was unraveling. The sparkling champagne flutes caught the light, the sound of sophisticated laughter echoed amidst opulent attire, and Julian, with a confident smile honed over years, glided through the crowd like an actor on a flawless stage. His charcoal gray suit clung perfectly, each handshake with investors a step closer to the billion-dollar deal that would shape his future. But his heart wasn't here. No. It was pounding, pulled toward a place he had tried to forget, a person he had tried to bury. His eyes, though striving to appear calm, kept darting toward the entrance, where soft light illuminated newly arriving guests. Clara. Would she come? That question, like a relentless drumbeat, resounded in his head, cracking the confident facade he had built. Julian paused, the wineglass in his hand tilting slightly, his gaze sweeping across the grand ballroom. Familiar faces, CEOs, investors, reporters, looked at him with admiration, but he felt like a stranger lost in their midst. He had prepared for this moment for months, every speech rehearsed to perfection, every gesture calculated to reinforce the image of a tech genius. But now, all he could think of was Clara Evans, the woman he had loved and left beneath the moonlight in Palo Alto. The invitation sent to her was more than a card. It was a challenge, a silent declaration that he had been right to choose his career over her. But deep down, Julian was afraid. Afraid she wouldn't come. Afraid she would come, and her gaze would expose the real him, a man who had traded love for the pursuit of glory. Then, as if time stood still, she appeared. Clara Evans stepped through the grand doors, the gentle light enveloping her like a halo. Her silver dress hugged her slender frame, simple yet elegant, standing out amidst the extravagance of the ballroom. Julian froze. His breath caught, the wine glass trembling faintly in his hand. Clara was as he remembered, her subtle smile, her deep green eyes, but now radiating a serenity he had never possessed. But it wasn't Clara that sent Julian's world spinning. No. It was the boy beside her, about 8 years old, with curly brown hair and warm brown eyes identical to his own in the old photos his mother once kept. The boy, introduced as Liam, held Clara's hand, gazing around the ballroom with innocent curiosity, and when his eyes met Julian's, a jolt shot through him. Julian's heart pounded, threatening to burst from his chest. A knot formed in his throat, sharp and unyielding. He looked at Liam, then at Clara, and the truth began to dawn, like a painting drawn stroke by deliberate stroke, undeniable. Liam wasn't just any child. Those eyes, deep brown, shimmering under the lights, were a mirror of his own, of the days when he was a dreamer at Stanford. Julian felt the ground shift beneath him. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the soft music, all faded away. There was only Clara, Liam, and a question stabbing into his mind like a blade. Could this boy be his son? He moved forward, his feet guided by an invisible force, yet each step felt heavy. The confident smile vanished, replaced by a bewilderment he had never shown to anyone. Clara met his gaze, and in that moment, time seemed to rewind. He saw again the long nights in the lab, the hurried kisses under fluorescent lights, and the night of their parting when she begged him to stay. But now, her eyes were no longer those of a hopeful young girl. They were the eyes of a woman who had overcome pain, who had built a life without him. And Liam, the boy who might be his son, was living proof of what he had left behind. "Liam, this is Mr. Carter," Clara said, her voice even, but Julian caught the faint tension beneath it. Liam looked at him, a shy smile blooming on his small face. "Hi," the boy said, his voice clear and bright, and Julian's heart shattered. He wanted to say something, to ask Clara right then, but the words stuck in his throat. He could only nod, a strained smile masking the storm of emotions raging within. Clara took Liam's hand, leading him through the crowd, and Julian stood rooted, watching their figures fade. But Liam's image, those brown eyes, that curly hair, seared into his mind, a reminder that the past was never truly buried. Beneath the Fairmont's lights, Julian's perfect world began to crack. The billion-dollar deal, the handshakes, the accolades, all felt hollow now. He had built an empire, but at what cost? Clara, with her calm and dignified presence, was proof of a life he had forsaken. And Liam, the boy who might be his son, was a question he could not escape. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain composure, but guilt and regret surged, drowning him like a tidal wave. Had he been wrong? That question, like another blade, cut deeper, stealing his breath. Julian turned back to the crowd, his smile returning, but it no longer felt natural. He shook an investor's hand, nodded at a compliment, but his mind was elsewhere. With Clara, with Liam, with the choices he thought he had left behind. Tonight, he would take the stage, proclaiming his success to the world. But deep down, he knew this moment wasn't just about the deal. It was about the truth. The truth Clara and Liam brought. The truth that would force him to confront the man he had become, and what he had lost. As the chandeliers bathed the ballroom in light, Julian felt as if he stood at a new crossroads, where past and present collided, and he wasn't sure he had the courage to move forward. In the quiet corner of the Fairmont Hotel, where soft light filtered through silk curtains, Julian Carter stood face to face with Clara Evans, his heart pounding as if it might shatter his chest. The opulent ballroom, with its clinking champagne glasses and congratulatory murmurs, now felt like a distant echo. There was only Clara, her delicate face illuminated by the gentle glow, and her deep green eyes, harboring both pain and resilience. Julian felt small before her, like a weary traveler returning home, unsure if the door remained open or was locked forever. He drew a deep breath, searching for words, but his voice faltered when Clara spoke, confirming what he had suspected since the moment he saw Liam. The boy was their son, the result of their final months together before he abandoned her beneath the moonlight in Palo Alto. "Liam needs stability," Clara said, her voice firm, yet laced with an unspoken sorrow. "He doesn't need a father who shows up only out of regret." Her words struck like a blade, sharp and unyielding, piercing Julian's heart. He wanted to protest, to insist that he wasn't driven by guilt, but Clara's gaze, calm, piercing, silenced him. She had lived a decade without him, raising Liam alone, crafting a safe world for the boy, and he, with all his fame and power, was now merely a stranger, a shadow from the past demanding entry into their lives. Julian bowed his head, his hands clenching, a wave of helplessness engulfing him. For the first time, he realized that money, fame, billion-dollar deals, all were meaningless against the void in his heart, a void shaped by Clara and Liam. That night, Julian didn't sleep. He sat in his glass-walled office, gazing at the twinkling lights of San Francisco Bay, but his mind held only Liam's image. Those brown eyes so like his own, the shy smile when he greeted him, and Clara, with a strength that left him both in awe and heartbroken. He had been wrong. Wrong to think success could fill what he had lost. Wrong to believe leaving Clara was a necessary price. Now, at the pinnacle of his career, he felt like a failure, a man who had built an empire but lost a family. A bold decision took shape within him, sharp and irresistible. He would not repeat the past. He would not miss this chance, the chance to be the father Liam needed, and perhaps the man Clara once loved. The next morning, Julian entered the boardroom, where his team awaited to finalize the billion-dollar deal. The air was thick with tension, expectant eyes fixed on him. But Julian, with a voice calm yet resolute, announced the deal's cancellation. Murmurs erupted, indignation and bewilderment spreading. "You're destroying everything!" an associate shouted, but Julian stood unmoved. He glanced out the window, where morning sunlight bathed the Golden Gate Bridge, and felt a strange relief. Money could be earned again. Fame could be rebuilt. But Liam and Clara, they were treasures he could not lose again. He left the boardroom, ignoring the stunned gazes, his heart brimming with a new purpose. In the days that followed, Julian stepped into Liam's life, moving slowly, cautiously, like a man walking on thin ice. Early mornings, he drove the boy to school in San Francisco, Liam's sneakers bouncing beside his polished leather shoes. Weekend afternoons, they played soccer in Golden Gate Park, Liam's laughter ringing clear like wind chimes, healing the wounds in Julian's soul. Quiet nights. He sat by Liam's bedside, reading adventure stories, his voice warm but his heart racing each time the boy yawned and nestled closer. Every moment with Liam was a gift, a chance to reclaim the years he had lost. But he knew the path was not easy. Clara, though gradually softening, kept her distance, like a mother shielding her child from promises that might break. Clara watched Julian from afar, her eyes a mix of skepticism and tenderness. She saw him change, the man who once put career above all, now patiently painted with Liam, laughing heartily when the boy splattered paint on his shirt. But she was afraid his sincerity was fleeting, that Julian might leave again, leaving Liam with a broken heart. Julian sensed her hesitation, a reminder that he had to prove himself, not with words, but with actions. He didn't push, didn't demand. He simply stayed, day after day, building trust bit by bit, like a craftsman reconstructing a ruined house. One afternoon, beneath the sunset painting San Francisco Bay crimson, Julian stood beside Clara on a narrow coastal path. Liam ran ahead, chasing small waves, his laughter blending with the wind. Julian took a deep breath, his hand trembling as he pulled a small box from his pocket. He knelt, his eyes locked on Clara's, where tears were already glistening. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I was wrong to leave you, to think I could live without you and Liam. I don't promise the world, but I promise to give my entire world to love and protect you both." He opened the box, revealing a sapphire ring, its blue hue matching her eyes. Clara covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks, and she nodded, wordless. They embraced, so tightly it seemed to erase the years of distance. Liam ran over, curious, and Julian scooped him up, the three of them melting into a warm hug, promising a future not built on the past, but on the love they would rebuild together. In the small apartment on the outskirts of Seattle, the dim glow from an old ceiling bulb cast a golden hue across Amelia Brooks' weary face. She sat in a worn armchair, her arms tightly cradling her 7-year-old twins, Sophie and Noah, who slept soundly in her embrace, their steady breaths a fragile comfort amidst the storm of her life. But Amelia's heart was restless. It pounded heavily, as if squeezed by a nameless pain. Just hours earlier, a phone call had torn her world apart. Daniel Reed, the husband she loved, had perished in a boating accident in Puget Sound. Pregnant with their third child in her 3rd month, Amelia felt the ground collapse beneath her. No more Daniel. No more evenings of him singing lullabies to Sophie and Noah. No more smiles that lit up this cramped apartment. Only her, alone, with 2 children and an unborn soul, facing a nightmare she had never imagined. The pain of losing her husband had barely begun to subside when another darkness descended. One afternoon, a cold, sharp knock at the door interrupted Noah's laughter as he played with building blocks on the floor. Amelia opened the door, her heart racing, and standing before her was a stranger, his eyes as cold as steel. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice even, but laced with menace. "Your husband owed the Raven Syndicate a substantial sum. Now that he's gone, the responsibility falls to you." The Raven Syndicate, a notorious group of creditors, merciless and unforgiving. Amelia shook her head, her voice trembling, trying to explain that she knew nothing of the debt, that Daniel had never mentioned it. But the man only curled his lip, a cruel smile etching itself into her memory. "Find a way to pay. Or else." He left the sentence hanging, turned, and walked away, leaving Amelia frozen at the threshold, her hands gripping the door frame as if to keep herself from collapsing. That night, Amelia didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, the faint light illuminating a pile of bills stacked high, their red numbers glaring like knife wounds in her soul. A debt of hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum she couldn't fathom, let alone repay. Daniel, the man she trusted, the father of her children, had hidden a brutal secret from her. Why hadn't he told her? Why had he left her in this hell? The questions spiraled, but no answers came. Only the truth remained. She was pregnant, with 2 young children, and men like the Raven Syndicate didn't wait. The late-night phone calls began, cold voices echoing from the other end, reminding her of the debt with threats that chilled her blood. Sudden knocks at the door, shadowy figures lurking outside her window. Every sound, every silhouette was a warning that her time was running out. Amelia threw herself into work like a desperate soul fleeing a tempest. By day, she cleaned houses for wealthy families, her hands calloused from chemicals, her back aching from hours of bending. By night, she waited tables at a local cafe, her forced smile masking the dark circles under her eyes. Her meager wages, every cent carefully counted, were never enough. Bills piled up, debts compounded, and the baby growing inside her, its gentle kicks a reminder that she could not falter. But her body was exhausted, her legs trembling with each step, and her mind was torn between the grief of losing Daniel and the terror of the Raven Syndicate. Some nights, when Sophie and Noah were fast asleep, Amelia sat in the darkness, tears streaming down her cheeks, wondering if she had the strength to go on. The image of her children was the only flame keeping Amelia upright. Sophie, with her golden hair and radiant smile, always asking when Daddy would come home. Noah, with his wide, curious eyes and endless questions, still drawing pictures of their family, though Daniel was gone forever. And the baby in her womb, a tiny soul she hadn't met but already loved more than anything. They were the reason she rose each morning, though her heart was shattered, though her body was breaking. Amelia told herself she had to be strong, to protect them, even as the world seemed to crumble. She gazed out the window, where the faint glow of streetlights lit the empty road, and felt as if she stood on the edge of an abyss, with the Raven Syndicate's darkness poised to swallow her whole. But Amelia didn't surrender. Though fear choked her every night, though loneliness became an unwelcome companion, she pressed on. She hid her pain behind the smiles she gave Sophie and Noah, buried her despair beneath endless work hours. She knew the Raven Syndicate wouldn't stop, that Daniel's debt was a noose tightening around her neck, but she also knew that, for her children, she had to find a way to survive. Every dollar earned, every extra shift, every time she rose after collapsing from exhaustion, it was a silent vow to Sophie, Noah, and the unborn child. Mommy won't give up. Beneath the dim light of the apartment, Amelia sat quietly, her hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the faint pulse of her baby. Outside, Seattle sank into the night, but within her, a small flame still burned. It was fragile, but it didn't extinguish. That flame was love, hope, and the resolve to protect her family at all costs. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know how to escape the Raven Syndicate's shadow. But she knew one thing. She would fight. For Sophie, for Noah, for the baby in her womb, and for herself, the woman who once thought she had lost everything, yet still found the strength to carry on, one small step at a time through the darkness. Beneath the glistening sunlight on Glacier Bay, the luxurious cruise ship glided smoothly past drifting icebergs, but within Amelia Brooke's heart, a tempest was raging. She stood on the deck, her hands gripping a silver tray tightly, her waitress uniform clinging to her slender frame, now trembling faintly from exhaustion. The job on the cruise from Seattle to Alaska was her final lifeline, a chance to pay off the colossal debt her husband, Daniel Reed, had left to the Raven Syndicate. But each aching step, each forced smile offered to VIP guests, was a reminder of all she had sacrificed. Amelia's mind wasn't here, amidst the lapping waves and dazzling light. It was in Seattle, with Sophie and Noah, her 7-year-old twins cared for by a neighbor, the children who were the only light in the darkness of her life. Amelia moved through the ship's restaurant, where chandeliers reflected off champagne flutes, creating a world of opulence starkly opposed to her cramped apartment. She carried a tray of drinks, her feet numb from long shifts, but she dared not stop. Every tip, every extra hour, was a step closer to freeing her family from the Raven Syndicate's shadow. She kept her head down, avoiding the curious gazes of wealthy patrons, her thoughts replaying Sophie's drawings, Noah's hug before she boarded the ship. "Mommy will be back soon," she had promised, her voice choking, but deep inside, she was afraid. Afraid the debt would consume her before she could keep that promise. Then, one evening, As stars twinkled in the Alaskan sky, Amelia's world crumbled again. She entered the VIP section, her tray trembling slightly in her hands, and her gaze inadvertently met a man seated at a corner table. Time stopped. The silver tray nearly slipped from her grasp, the pounding of her heart drowning out all surrounding sounds. There, in an expensive black suit, his hair neatly combed, sat Daniel Reed. Her husband. The man she believed had died in a boating accident in Puget Sound. Alive. Laughing. His hand rested gently on the arm of a young woman, Vanessa, radiant in a silk dress, her smile bright as if untouched by pain. Amelia froze, her breath catching, as if someone had just crushed her heart. Daniel. Alive. Here. In this lavish world, while she and their children struggled in hell. A tidal wave of anger and pain surged within her, sweeping away all reason. Amelia felt blood rush to her head, her hands clenching the tray until her knuckles whitened. How could this be? Daniel, who had vowed to protect her, who held Sophie and Noah each night, had faked his death. He had abandoned her, leaving her to bear the crushing debt, to fight alone against the Raven Syndicate, against fear and loneliness. And now, he sat here, as if Sophie, Noah, and the unborn child in her womb had never existed. Amelia's gaze drifted to Vanessa, the woman giggling at Daniel's story, and a bitter resentment welled up. He hadn't just left her, he had built a new life, a perfect facade, while she drowned in darkness. Amelia wanted to scream, to rush forward, to force him to face what he had done, but she stood rooted, her feet as if anchored to the floor. A colleague lightly touched her shoulder, whispering a reminder to keep serving, and Amelia, with superhuman effort, turned away, her eyes blurred with suppressed tears. But within her, a storm was brewing. She couldn't let this pass. She couldn't let Daniel escape what he had wrought. She needed the truth, no matter how painful. Late that night, when her shift ended, Amelia stepped onto the deck, where Alaska's starlit sky blazed brilliantly, yet failed to soothe her shattered heart. The cold wind whipped through, tossing her hair, but she felt nothing but the burning anger within. She sought Daniel, his silhouette appearing at a corner of the deck, alone, staring out at the inky sea. Amelia approached, her legs trembling but resolute, like a soldier before a final battle. "Daniel," she called, her voice hoarse, barely loud enough for him to turn. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she saw a flicker of panic cross his face, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar smile. "I'm afraid you've mistaken me for someone else," he said, his voice even, as if she were a mere passerby. His words struck like a dagger, slicing deep into Amelia's heart. He denied her, denied Sophie, Noah, and everything they had shared. But that fleeting panic in his eyes betrayed the truth. He knew who she was. He knew he had faked his death, fled his debts, left her and their children in hell. Amelia stood motionless, her hands clenched, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "You think you can hide forever?" she whispered, her voice quivering but laced with fury. Daniel shrugged, turning away, as if she weren't worth his concern. But Amelia didn't let him walk away so easily. She stepped forward, blocking his path, her eyes blazing. "I won't let you escape," she said, her voice low but sharp, like a vow. Daniel looked at her, just for a second, then brushed past, leaving her alone on the deck beneath the starry sky. Amelia stood there, the icy wind cutting her skin, but within her, a flame of resolve began to burn. Her heart was shattered, but it didn't weaken. It grew stronger than ever. Daniel could fake his death, could build a new life, but she wouldn't let him forget what he had done. She would uncover the truth, make him pay, not just for her, but for Sophie, Noah, and the child she carried. Beneath Alaska's stars, Amelia took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and returned to her cabin. She was no longer the broken woman of 7 years ago. She was a mother, a warrior, and she would fight no matter the cost. In the cramped cabin aboard the Alaskan cruise ship, Amelia Brooks sat beneath the dim flicker of a light bulb, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the pages of documents on an old wooden table. Her heart still ached, as if torn apart by the betrayal of Daniel Reed, the husband she believed dead, now living lavishly under a new identity. But the pain didn't defeat her. No. It forged her into a resolute mother, a warrior determined to reclaim her life for Sophie, Noah, and the unborn child within her. Each heartbeat was a reminder. She could not let Daniel escape the havoc he had wrought. Beneath the cold stars of Alaska, Amelia silently vowed to make him pay, not just for her, but for the years she and her children endured in the hell of the Raven Syndicate's grip. Amelia began to act, moving quietly like a shadow stalking its prey. By day, she still carried trays of drinks in the VIP restaurant, her forced smile masking sharp eyes that observed every detail. By night, when the ship sank into silence, she slipped into the records room, searching passenger files. Her fingers traced each line of text, her heart pounding as she uncovered Daniel's new identity, a foreign name. But the eyes in the photo were those of the man who abandoned her. She noted everything meticulously, each piece of information a brick in the wall of justice she was building. But records alone weren't enough. Amelia needed proof. Proof to expose not only his faked death, but the crimes he concealed. She recalled an old colleague, someone who once worked with a private investigator in Seattle. On a frigid night, Amelia stood on the ship's deck, her hand gripping the phone tightly, her voice a whisper as she sent a desperate message. "I need help," she wrote, briefly recounting Daniel, the debt, the betrayal. The colleague responded swiftly, and within days, a trove of documents arrived. Amelia opened them in her cabin, her eyes widening as she read. Daniel hadn't just faked his death. He was entangled in a massive fraud, stealing millions from investors, funneling money through secret accounts. Illegal financial transactions, forged contracts, all laid bare the true man he was, a predator thriving on others' suffering. Amelia clenched her fists, anger surging, but she held it back. This was the weapon she needed. This was how she would seize her freedom. But the Raven Syndicate remained a looming shadow. Amelia knew the police could arrest Daniel, but if she mishandled this, the ruthless creditors might turn their sights on her and her children. She couldn't take that risk. On a sleepless night, she sat in silence, the faint light casting a glow on her determined face. She would use Daniel's own crimes to shield her family. Amelia contacted the Raven Syndicate through an intermediary, her voice calm but cutting as she proposed. She would deliver Daniel, along with proof of the money he stole, in exchange for her and her children's safety. The other end fell silent, then a cold voice agreed. "If you're lying, you'll regret it," he warned. Amelia nodded, though no one saw. She wasn't lying. She held the truth, and the truth was power. At the same time, Amelia sent all the evidence to the Seattle police, accompanied by a detailed explanation. She left no chance for Daniel to slip away. Each move she made, from copying documents to sending emails, was a hammer blow shattering his facade. She worked in the shadows, with the precision of a mother who knew her children's future depended on her. But within, she wasn't just angry. She was wounded. Wounded by the man she once loved, once trusted, who had become a stranger willing to abandon Sophie and Noah for a life of luxury. Each document she gathered was a cut to her heart, but also a step closer to freedom. On a foggy morning in Alaska, as the ship anchored near a small port, the security team appeared. Amelia stood at a distance, hidden behind a corner of the deck, her breath catching as she watched Daniel being led out. His eyes were filled with despair, his expensive suit now crumpled, his confident demeanor gone. He glanced back, as if sensing her gaze, but Amelia didn't waver. She watched him being taken away, each step he took lifting a 7-year burden from her shoulders. The Raven Syndicate withdrew, the debt was erased, and in that moment, Amelia felt relief for the first time in years. The cold wind swept through, tousling her hair, but she didn't tremble. She stood tall, her gaze steadfast, knowing she had reclaimed her life. Not just for herself, but for Sophie, Noah, and the child she carried. Amelia returned to her cabin, her hand resting gently on her belly, feeling the faint pulse of her baby. The ship sailed through Glacier Bay, sunlight glinting on the sea, like a promise of the future. She was no longer the broken woman of 7 years ago, trapped in the Raven Syndicate's darkness. She was a mother, a warrior, who had turned pain into strength. Daniel had lost, not because of the police or the syndicate, but because Amelia never gave up. Beneath Alaska's light, she took a deep breath, her heart still aching. But now it beat for hope, for her children, and for a new life waiting ahead. Beneath the twinkling streetlights of Seattle, Amelia Brooks stepped into her small apartment, her heart pounding with the fervor of someone returning from a long journey. The door creaked open, and instantly, the clear, joyful laughter of Sophie and Noah filled the air, banishing the void once ruled by fear. The 7-year-old twins rushed into her arms, their small hands clinging tightly, their faces radiant like sunshine after a storm. Amelia knelt down, enveloping her children in a fierce embrace, tears glistening in her eyes but a smile blooming on her lips. 7 years living in the shadow of the Raven Syndicate, 7 years bearing the weight of Daniel Reed's debt and betrayal, now dissolved like mist before dawn. She hadn't just survived, she had triumphed. And this apartment, though cramped, was where a new light was beginning to shine. Amelia felt the warmth of Sophie and Noah, the scent of their childish hair mingling with the aroma of cookies she brought back from her shop. After days adrift on the Alaskan cruise, after the shock of discovering Daniel alive and the grueling quest for retribution, she had returned, carrying a modest but precious sum of savings. With it, Amelia opened a small bakery in Pike Place Market, where the fragrance of freshly baked cookies wafted, blending with the vibrant bustle of the famous market. Chocolate chip cookies, golden waffles, and fragrant toasted bread drew in tourists and locals alike. Each morning she stood behind the counter, kneading dough, a genuine smile spreading across her face as customers praised her treats. The bakery wasn't just a livelihood, it was proof of her rebirth, a woman who once thought she had lost everything. But the scars of Daniel's betrayal lingered, like a faint line etched on Amelia's heart. Some nights, when the bakery closed and her children slept soundly, she sat in silence, the dim apartment light casting a glow on her face, and memories of Daniel resurfaced. The man she once loved, once trusted, had faked his death, abandoning her and their children to a hell of debt. The pain didn't fade easily, like a wound healed on the surface but still throbbing within. She wondered, how could he do it? How could he turn his back on Sophie, Noah, and their unborn child? The questions cut deep, but Amelia refused to let them drag her down. She had learned that suffering didn't define her. Her strength lay in her love for her children, in her ability to rise after every fall. Joy now came from simple moments, things once obscured by darkness. Amelia found happiness taking Sophie and Noah to the nearby park, where their laughter echoed as they swung on swings, Sophie's golden hair dancing in the breeze, Noah's wide eyes sparkling as he caught a ball. Evenings, she sat on the floor with them, reading books under the soft glow of a lamp, her warm voice weaving tales of adventure, while Sophie nestled against her shoulder and Noah scribbled on paper. Weekends, the three of them colored together, wax crayons sketching vibrant houses, simple dreams brimming with love. These moments, though small, were the guiding light for Amelia, reminding her she had built a new life, not just for her children, but for herself. Standing by the apartment window, Amelia gazed out at Seattle's shimmering lights, the towering buildings like lighthouses in the night. She took a deep breath, feeling freedom for the first time in 7 years. Freedom from the Ravens syndicate, from the debt, from Daniel's shadow. She was no longer the woman trembling at a knock on the door, no longer the mother hiding tears behind a forced smile. She was Amelia Brooks, who had turned pain into strength, who had wrested her life back from a betrayer's hands. But this freedom hadn't come easily. It was earned through sleepless nights, grueling workdays, and a heart once shattered. Amelia knew the scars would never vanish, but she also knew they didn't define her. They were proof she had survived, had fought, and had won. Sophie and Noah were the center of her world. Each morning, as she woke them, Sophie's chirping voice recounting dreams, or when Noah snuggled into her lap begging for another cookie, Amelia felt her heart overflow. The child in her womb, now growing stronger, each gentle kick a reminder of a brighter future. She no longer feared tomorrow. The small bakery, though a humble start, was a symbol of hope, of the power to begin again. Amelia stood tall, her gaze unwavering as she looked out at the city. She hadn't just survived. She had rediscovered herself, not the woman of 7 years ago, but a stronger version, ready for a future filled with light. As the city lights flickered, Amelia turned back to the apartment where Sophie and Noah slept soundly, their colored drawings scattered across the table. She gently tucked their blankets, kissing each forehead, and settled into the old armchair. The apartment was small but warm. It was home. It was where she and her children rebuilt their dreams, one day at a time. Amelia closed her eyes, a faint smile curving her lips. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't afraid. With Sophie, Noah, and the child soon to be born, she had everything she needed to keep going. Beneath the dim apartment light, Amelia felt the pulse of hope, and for the first time in 7 years, she slept deeply, no shadows haunting her dreams. And you, my dear audience, brace yourselves for the next twist in this jaw-dropping story. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're truly loving what I'm doing here. And drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a thrill to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe.